Good evening, folks. Tonight we're going to be talking about language and plasticity. So mainly, how does language influence the brain, and this idea of plasticity, which is the brain's ability to sort of make do with what it has and make up for other areas' lack. So what you have in front of you is a little bit of a diagram or a flowchart about what happens when you're interpreting language, when you're reading something. So this is actually happening to you right now. So this visual cortex sees the word, obviously. So then your angular gyrus transforms these visual representations into auditory code. So what does that mean? That's what you're doing right now. That little voice in your head that kind of pronounces words as you go along, that's this angular gyrus. And this is all on your left side of your brain, by the way. So after it's turned into an auditory code, this Wernicke's area interprets the auditory code. So we're describing the process of reading. Broca's area then controls the speech muscles via the motor cortex, which is the fifth step. So after we interpret the auditory code in our Wernicke's area, which is in our left temporal lobe, Broca's area, which is in our frontal lobe, controls the speech via the motor cortex. So Wernicke's area interprets the code, Broca's area produces the speech. That's a good way to remember those two. Wernicke's area interprets, Broca's area speaks. So this is what's happening in your brain right now. Plasticity, as I said, this is the ability of the brain to basically make do with what it has. For example, this young lady had a hemispherectomy to end life-threatening seizures. Her remaining hemisphere compensated for the damage. So if you look at that diagram, this whole section of her brain was cut out. Now, the brain didn't repair itself, it didn't get this back, but the other parts of the brain basically picked up the slack and performed some of the functions that were previously performed by the side she had removed, which is the left side. So it forms new connections, reassigns existing networks, and inserts new neurons, some grown from stem cells. So this is amazing to me. The fact that the brain can basically pick up all of the stuff that was going on here and basically reassign it to areas here and make do with what it has. So this little girl is functioning like a normal human being. Look, she's doing ballet. So plasticity, just look at the word, you think of the word plastic. What can plastic do? Kind of reshape itself and mold itself into something different. So this is the brain's ability to be flexible and to mold and shape itself as needed. Now we're going to be looking at this in depth Monday night, but the main thing to take away is that our brain has two hemispheres, our left side and our right side. And information kind of crossing this corpus callosum, which is the connection that bridges the two sides of the brain, lateralization is going to one side. So if the functions are performed on this side, that's a lateralization to the right side, and vice versa. So these two hemispheres perform very different functions. And the reason we know about these differences is because people with brain damage in the left hemisphere revealed much of what was going on there. So if somebody lost function in one part of the brain, primarily to do with language, we studied them, and now we know about the functions of the two hemispheres and how they coordinate with one another. So they have a very close relationship. They're always working together at all times. You might hear people say, oh, I'm a left brain person, oh, I'm a right brain person. What that means is not that they only think with their right side or their left side, but that they privilege one side or the other. So the main difference is the left side has to do with thoughts and logic, details, very specific details, such as trees, rather than the right side, which thinks of the big picture like forest. Language, words, and definitions, that's why your language center is located over on your left side. Linear and literal, meaning it's very logical, it's sort of one thing follows to the next, cause and effect. Calculation, math, things like that, formulas, pieces and details, very specific information. So the left side has to do with like analyzing, reading, math, language, and the right side is a little bit different. So this has to do with more of the feelings, the intuition, things that aren't exactly able to be put into words and language. So like you have this overarching feeling about something, or you have this intuition. We talked about that in our last unit. This has to do with the right side. And as opposed to the details that are focused on in the left side, the right hemisphere thinks in the big picture. So rather than seeing the trees, you would see the forest. There's this saying, don't mistake the forest for the trees, meaning don't have your big picture be based on one particular. You have to expand your view and have a broader perspective. The right hemisphere does that. It thinks in big picture type terms. It also deals with language, but a little bit different. It doesn't deal with the words and the meaning of words and things like that. It has more to do with tone and inflection and context, meaning all of the subtle emotional content that we put into our words. So when we're angry, our tone and our inflection is expressed that way. We might get louder, we might emphasize certain words. Likewise, when we're happy, the tone is completely different. So language on the right hemisphere has to do with more of this, feelings, the feelings that we imbue word with. Whereas on the left hemisphere, it has more to do with the words themselves, the thought, the specific words, the meanings of the words. So it also has to do with inferences and associations, making connections between ideas. It has to do with perception, our senses and how we perceive things. And as I said, it deals with wholes, meaning the whole picture of things rather than the specific details. And there are people who say that this is where the self is located. I don't know about that, but the self would be a whole. If you're thinking with your left hemisphere, maybe you're thinking about yourself in a specific way. If you're thinking with your right hemisphere, you might think about yourself as a whole. So there's been some, there's been some controversy over the years, people claiming that the left brain is male and the right brain is female. It turns out that there's not so much to back this up besides existing stereotypes, but we will debunk those sufficiently once we get into development, specifically gender-based development. All right, folks, that's it for tonight. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you on Monday.